Hi there, I'm Ava Kuehl, owner and designer of Epaulet, and your host for the Styleforum Sessions podcast. I'm here with Pat Allen, the founder and designer of Uniform LA. This podcast is coordinated by www.styleforum.net, the most comprehensive online community dedicated to menswear fashion, style, and discussion. How's it going, Pat?
Going great. Grateful to be here. Happy to be in your beautiful home in Redondo Beach.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for making the voyage down to the South Bay.
Of course, it's like a nice little vacation from the city.
No, it's like 10 degrees cooler down here.
Yeah, and
The coffee situation is not quite at the level of what you're used to, but I appreciate that you're able to find like the one really good place around here.
of course, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Great. So let's start. I always ask everyone the same question to start. Tell me something that's making you happy right now.
Yeah, that's a great question. In my personal life, my father recently retired
Oh,
out of nowhere. He's a pharmacist. He runs a family pharmacy. And recently, we thought he'd never retire. Recently, out of nowhere, I was on my way to LAX to fly to Las Vegas, and I got a text at 5 or 6 in the morning that he'd retired the day before. He didn't tell anyone, but it's been really exciting to see him enter like the next phase in his life, and like sort of he seems to be embracing all these things and I'm seeing a side of him that I've never seen before, that's like very like youthful and playful, and we get to talk a lot more. So that's something I'm really excited and happy about.
yeah, that's awesome. It's good for him to have more time available to enjoy life.
No, absolutely. What are you happy about?
What am I happy about? Yeah, you know what? I'm like business wise, I'm very happy that I feel like a lot of the enthusiasm for the kind of stuff that me and you sell is really coming back. My brand is more business casual focused, so not, wasn't as relevant in the pandemic times. But I just feel like in general, people are feeling better. Things are getting back to normal, and there's been like a sense of optimism and enthusiasm that I haven't seen in a while.
Absolutely.
So yeah, happy about that. Happy that the insane heat wave that we had here in LA for like 2 straight weeks is finally over too.
Yeah. September is oddly, a lot of people don't know, but in LA, September is like the hottest month we experience.
Yeah, September is the hottest, and June is like often one of the coldest.
Yeah, it's so odd. When the rest of the country is experiencing spring and summer, we're in an overcast, June gloom
Yeah,
situation.
that is true. All right, so let's talk about Uniform LA. Your origin story is really interesting, and I know you were a Styleforum member for 10 years before starting your own label. So, just kind of in a nutshell, tell us how you got into this business and how things started for you.
Yeah, of course. Sort of what led me to Style Forum led me into launching the brand. Essentially, I found Style Forum because I moved from where I went to school in Boulder, Colorado, at the University of Colorado,
Hmm.
to Denver. And at the time, I felt out of place with the way that I was dressed, and I felt uncomfortable in what I saw at that time to be a more cosmopolitan city.
Hmm.
And I wanted to dress better. And I would go around sort of to the mall. And, we talked about this off mic a little bit because you were a buyer for Saks.
Hmm.
And sort of like what the retail landscape looked like at that time. This was roughly like 2005-ish.
Oh yeah.
And, I had a lot of trouble finding and this was sort of like, I believe like around like the affliction days of style.
Yes, we had a nationwide affliction during all those days for sure.
The Von Dutch had a hold on, or
Right.
was maybe we were coming out of the grips of Von Dutch.
Yeah, the Rock and Republic days, the time
Oh,
when it seemed like Hulk Hogan was somehow the creative director for all of menswear.
the bejeweled back pockets. That was those times, and I would go to the mall and I would look for things that were understated and sort of just more representative of how I felt about myself. Which was more. I wanted to be more refined and understated, and through that, I found Style Forum, and ultimately, while Style Forum helped me find a number of items that satiated a lot of my needs, I always felt that basics was one thing
Hmm.
that I could never truly find that I really loved. And, over time, I sort of got really curious and became more passionate about style and fashion. And eventually it was the loss of a close friend of mine, Ben, that kind of just led me to one of these moments where it was kind of like, life is short,
Right.
and I noticed at that time that I was spending all my time. I was a professional DJ full time. I was DJing 6 or 7 nights in Denver.
What was your DJ name?
It's been a I've had a plethora of names,
Okay.
none of which anyone will print. So that's
Okay.
why. And my first DJ name was DJ Breaka with
That's
with a hard A.
that's a good one.
But it looked cool printed. I thought
Yeah.
it never sounds cool. I don't think this is the one time it came off well. And then after that, I changed it to DJ 11,
Hmm.
which was an inside joke. And then
Right.
later,
Because like, is it because your amp went up to 11?
no, it's much more embarrassing than that. It was kind of given to me. I was in a club, and my DJ partner at the time, I DJ with another DJ named Jeremiah. He goes by Jeremiah James now in San Diego. Wonderful DJ. But he was DJing, and a coworker from another bar ran into a girl he knows, and he said, "Yeah, we're here with the DJ." And she goes, "Oh yeah, he's good, but I'm a bigger fan of his partner, which was me." And he
Oh.
goes, "Oh, you like Pat?" And she said, "Yeah, he's so hot." On a scale from on a scale from 1 to 10, he's an 11. And they jokingly started calling me DJ 11,
Ah.
and I just kind of ran with it. Another embarrassing story, just like the breaker thing. But ultimately, the last name that I had in Denver was DJ Boo Bear.
Okay.
And again, it was a joke. The full title was DJ Boo Bear, the professional picnic basket snatcher. And I had my roommate was a designer, and he designed, it was a bear wearing a ghost costume for Halloween holding a picnic basket.
Wow.
But no, surprisingly, no one would print that. So it's by default DJ Pat Allen,
Okay.
which,
All right.
which isn't very creative.
Okay. So you're DJ Pat Allen, AKA Boo Bear, AKA 11, AKA Breaka Breaka, AKA Dirt McGirt, being in Colorado, and then what?
So yeah, I got to a point where I was pretty established as a club DJ there, and I
Hmm.
had 6 or 7 nights, and I still had this passion and this desire to find what I was looking for, and a lot of that was fueled by the DJ thing, because I would be in nicer nightclubs, bottle service clubs, or higher end like restaurants, where you want to look presentable and you want to look nice. But on the other side of that was a lot of DJ booths are designed with the amps in the booth.
Hmm.
So by the end of the night, the booth is like 100 some degrees, so you're sweating, and like it's not the most optimal conditions to
Right.
wear like all your nice clothes.
Right.
So I was sort of like still on this hunt for especially t-shirts in the beginning. And there was a time where I was really down. Just I think it's hard to maintain like that schedule where you're up till like 3 or 4 in the morning, and you sort of exist in a world that's opposite of everyone else. And I heard a podcast by, I believe his name is Michael Pressman
Hmm.
from
Oh
Everlane.
yeah. Uh huh. Definitely.
And this was the time that Everlane was making waves with the $15 Made in the USA T-shirt. And I was interested in what they were doing as a brand. I thought it was interesting. But the thing that really caught me, I was driving to a gig in Boulder listening to his podcast. And he talked about how he started with $10,000 to
Hmm.
do this. And, it kind of clicked. I was like, wow, I can get $10,000. I have $10,000.
Yeah.
And then like I started looking into it, and it was just like a curiosity of mine. And then, my friend Ben died suddenly. And that was sort of like a wake up moment where, I love DJing, but I'd sort of lost my like passion for it. When you monetize your passions, it's hard
Hmm.
to
Yeah.
stay passionate a lot of times because it doesn't belong to you any longer.
It's a great way to say it. Yeah, it's very true.
yeah, you sort of like give it away. You sacrifice a lot in the monetization
Yeah.
of that. So, when Ben died, he died suddenly in Singapore, and I just had a moment where it was just like cold water, where it was like, I think so often in life have we have these things that we're like, one day I'll do this,
Hmm.
one day I'll do that. And for me, it was like traveling and like, I've always wanted something that was like all encompassing. I had friends around me who were like, my roommate at the time was a guy by the name of DJ Frank E,
Hmm.
who is like a multi-platinum producer for a number of people. But like I saw his whole come up,
Right.
where he was like hustling every day. And I would always see him and say, like, I want something like that.
Hmm.
Like this guy clocks in the studio every morning first thing and he gets home after me. And it's like I always was looking for something like that. And like I kind of thought I had a hunch like maybe the clothing thing is it. So, after Ben died, I called my friend, her name's Erin Helgerson. I believe she's design lead at Honest now, Jessica Alba's company,
Oh, wow.
and sort of told her, hey, like this is my idea, how do I do it? And her first response was, you don't want to do this. It's not what it looks like from the outside. It's not, it's not as glamorous as it is. Like think about it and let me know. And so I went away and I thought about it and I called her back in a week and I said, no, I really want to do this. And that's sort of where it all jumped off
Hmm.
was, going through her and like talking to her. And she introduced me to, I flew out to LA. I was still living in Denver. I flew out to
Right.
LA and, met our first pattern maker
Oh,
and,
wow.
and sample maker, who taught me kind of everything about it. But that was sort of the origin of the brand is like I would DJ in Denver on the weekends and then fly to LA during the week.
Hmm.
And I would crash on an air mattress in my friend's living room and catch the bus
Right.
to go meet with our pattern and sample maker, who's an older woman named Sierra, who'd been doing it forever.
And kind of what year was this about?
This was roughly 2000, I'd say 12,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
roughly 2000. And I mean, I knew nothing.
Yeah.
I thought we made one pattern, we were done.
Hmm.
And I first before even meeting with a pattern maker, I took a class. I use the term class lightly. It was like an online class with Hyde and You.
Oh,
Who,
yeah. I remember
yeah.
hiding you. Yeah. Uh huh.
And I forget I think it was Skillshare, whatever Skillshare was before.
Hmm.
And he had this lesson plan how to make your favorite T-shirt or how to make the perfect T-shirt. And he largely goes over specking a T-shirt.
Right.
And essentially, I think it's a little more simplified than the process actually is when you get out into the real world. But, it was like, here's how you spec a t-shirt. You take these measurements, high point shoulder to the hem is the body length. And then you spec it here and there and you give that to a pattern maker and she'll make a pattern and you have the perfect t-shirt. So that's sort of how I got started. I ordered a bunch of t-shirts and spec'd them all out and made notes about what I like and didn't like about them. And then
Cool.
proceeded to flounder for a long time.
Yeah, it takes a long time. I mean, for me, it was similar. The first thing that I made was a really slim fit woven shirt. That was our first in house design because this was like 2009. This was kind of the Band of Outsiders days
Oh
when
yeah,
the only woven shirts that you could find on the market were pretty billowy, huge ones from J Crew or like very like Euro sleek ones that you would find at the Saks or Neiman Marcus.
yeah,
So we started doing like much like you. I had no idea what I was up to. I had a background in retail, but I certainly didn't have a background in design. So I was working with pattern makers and kind of like a production office in New York City, and then doing all of our work in the New York City Garment Center. And for anyone listening, New York City and LA are the two biggest garment centers in the country, with LA definitely being a lot larger in scope,
yeah.
especially these days.
In development, were you working with? I know Martin Greenberg, right? Isn't
Yeah, Martin Greenfield. Yeah,
Greenfield? So yeah,
he had a suit factory. I'm not actually sure if they still operate. He was making the Band of Outsiders suits.
yeah.
Yeah, Martin Greenfield was doing that. There was another one. I'm forgetting the name, but it was run by an Italian guy. It had like an Italian name who was doing all the Tom Brown suits. That was in
Okay,
Queens. But like right around, kind of like it's close to Times Square, a little bit south, like Sixth Avenue, 37th Street. This is kind of the garment district of New York City. And once you start to go into like all of those buildings on those blocks, there'll just be multiple workshops, which kind of like in LA, a lot of the work done there is actually sampling. So you'll
Yeah.
have a big retailer located in New York City that is ultimately going to do production in China, in Malaysia, in Vietnam, but they do their designs in New York and then they'll make the initial samples in New York and then send it abroad because most factories require, as you know, a garment called a sew-by. The
Yeah.
factory needs to
Yeah.
see the physical garment, not just the pattern. But if you're a small scale designer like us, you can also have these pattern shops make you 100 jackets, make
Yeah.
you 75 shirts, stuff like that.
So what was the next step for you? You're developing this slim fit woven shirt, and
Yeah,
then
I did. I mean, from my side, I discovered that like New York City is a good place to do some production, but it's not the best for specializing in things. So we were doing the shirts like in New York, and then fairly quickly I offloaded all the shirt manufacturing to New England Shirt, which was in Fall River, Massachusetts. But they were only a shirt factory,
okay.
so they had specialized. All that they do are wovens. The place in New York and a lot of the places in LA are contractors. You
Hmm.
can go to a place here in LA that can make jeans, but they could also make a sundress.
Yeah.
They could maybe not a t-shirt, but they can make a woven button-down shirt. They can make a jacket with a liner.
Yeah.
A lot of the factories on the East Coast are more specialized, so like they only make shirts. And then one other place like Hertling, they only make pants.
Yeah.
And you do get a better quality of that exact garment there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I saw, I think I was looking at your Styleforum thread. So you began your thread in 2017. That was your first post.
Yeah, I believe that. I
I
believe
saw,
that.
I saw it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm holding you to that number.
Okay. 2017. I believe that's correct. Yeah. So it was a long time before, like, ultimately we got into Styleform. I was a member in Styleform, obviously that whole time.
Right.
But a lot of that was just coming from the side of being a fan of
Mm,
everything and actually learning. Like I have no experience sewing, and so much of construction. Everything I learned about sewing initially, I learned from Sierra, who was our pattern maker, and I would go down there and I would just ask her to teach me things, and
yeah.
I really like loved spending time with her, and she was so knowledgeable. She was schooled in Paris, and was just she's such a beautiful person and a wonderful, she was like one of my first mentors, and she would teach me like this is a single needle, this is a double needle cover stitch, this is an interlock,
Yeah.
this is a flat lock, and like all these things, and would kind of like help me understand how to communicate, because I think that's a lot of people outside the industry, when you're trying to get in, there's a different language being spoken that you kind of have to be initiated to.
Hmm.
Um, so I was going back and forth with her, and initially the whole idea with uniform was, at first, is like, we're gonna make the perfect T-shirt,
Hmm.
and there's going to be three models of them. It's going to
Right.
be a crew neck, a U neck, and a V neck. It had a slim fit. It was very, very slim.
Hmm.
And again, I didn't know anything about t-shirts at this time, so there were little things like it went in at the waist really aggressively. Like our first run was in like heather gray. It was in a 50-50 micro modal Supima
Oh
cotton,
wow. Yeah.
which was extremely drapey. It was kind of like what was happening at the time, and it just like it tapered aggressively in the waist, and I was kind of naive to what our customer would be, and just like the general population. We were trying it on people who were very slim,
Hmm.
and we would make it slimmer and slimmer and slimmer,
Right.
which hurt us when we got out into the real world and you see it on different body types.
Hmm.
But essentially it was years of just kind of like going through it and making a lot of mistakes and having no idea what I was doing, and sort of coming up that way.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I tried t-shirts as well. Did you have a lot of problems also managing like the shrinkage because you were garment dyeing the t-shirts?
yeah, at first we weren't garment dyeing, we were buying yarn dyed. It
Hmm.
was a heather gray yarn dyed.
Oh,
But yeah, we weren't like pre-washing the rolls, and Sierra had me terrified of garment dyeing because she would tell me like horror stories. and they weren't working in a digital system.
Hmm.
Like they weren't digitizing. We weren't developing a zero by zero pattern, which to anyone listening who's not in the fashion industry who doesn't know that term is like your core fit,
Yeah.
right? The way we develop now is we develop a zero by zero, a core fit. And then with that, we'll add the shrinkage to it. What we were
Hmm.
doing, we were taking paper patterns and then just washing it
Wow.
and then adjusting the core pattern,
Yep.
and I talked to them. I'm like, hey, isn't there like computer software that could do all this stuff? And they were like,
Yeah.
no, it doesn't exist. And I was like, okay. And for a minute, I thought maybe there's an opportunity there,
Hmm.
not being a programmer or whatever. But, so it took a long time to get, I think the brand went online. I'm rambling a little bit, but I think the brand launched in 2015 or 16. we
Hmm.
we launched our e-commerce store,
Right.
and at that point we cut the V-neck, so we had two styles.
Yeah.
I'm sure we had a crew neck and a U-neck in black and white. So you come to the site and there were 4 SKUs,
Wow.
and we again, like we launched like not understanding the customer at all and sort of like what they wanted or what they needed, and I was very much designing from like my own point of view.
I think, like you were very of the time. You're also a little bit ahead of the time. When I started a bit before that, I started in 2008, but I even saw such a transformation in how startups worked. Like back in 2008, or if you started something before that, like, you were kind of expected to have like a collection.
Yeah.
You're going to have a collection, you're going to have a lookbook, you're going to have this whole narrative, and you're going to have shirts and jackets and pants and all these things together. And then I think as time went on in the 2010s, and particularly right now with the way that online advertising works, like it's actually like way more virtuous to have your products be hyper targeted. A
Hmm.
lot of kind of new customers that you're going to acquire through advertising, like they don't really care if you have a lookbook or not, and it's a way easier to communicate this is the perfect T-shirt
Yeah.
through an Instagram ad than this is my vision for fall 2022, and it's a day at the races. Look at
Yeah.
all this.
Yeah.
You only have like one picture, or like one brief video to say things. So um, I think it was also really smart that you started that. A lot of people make the mistake where they go super ambitious. They sink a lot of money into R&D, and they're making a lot of things versus just trying one thing first. Making your mistakes, learning your lessons, and then building on that. I did the same thing. I just did it with woven shirts instead of t-shirts.
Yeah. And it is, I think it's much easier to, for lack of a better word, like survive,
Yeah.
your mistakes and learn and then iterate. And that was one thing about the brand is we were forced to function that way because we didn't have any money.
Right.
When I first started, I was, at this point I'd moved to LA full time, but I was living in my friend's living room on an air mattress. He was kind enough to let me live there. And I would clean up and do everyone's dishes and try to I would try to contribute as much to the household as possible. But that's all at the time that I could really afford
Yeah.
was making these T-shirts, and we were selling. I can't remember what we were selling for at the time, but it was also cheaper to make at that time because this was a long time ago.
It's smart. Like I'd say humility is not a thing that you often encounter in our industry, but like it pays off. It pays off to be humble at the beginning and just, start small. Um, okay, cool. Uh, your aesthetic is elevated essentials. With such a crowded field for all these great basics, how do you set yourself apart?
That's a great question. As a brand, there's three core things that we focus on, and it's fit, fabric, and construction.
Mhm.
As I mentioned, I came to Styleforum, looking for these basics that I had in mind that I couldn't find. And even when I got introduced to higher end, nicer labels, I would often feel that I would buy something and one of those aspects was missing. The fit might be really dialed in, and the construction was, construction both in how it's made and like how simply the stitch detailing was on point. But I was like, this fabric is sort of lacking.
Mhm.
So like I'd have ideas, and there's other things that other combinations of that as well, right? Like I was shopping this past weekend at Westfield Century City and found like a pair of cargo pants. I picked them up and I was so impressed by the fabric and construction. And then when I went to try them on, it was, not for me. Just
Okay, that hefty bag fit.
yeah, it was, I don't know. It just, yeah, it wasn't for me.
Okay, that's a
But
generous way of saying it. Yeah.
yeah, I'm trying, yeah, not dropping any names.
I appreciate this.
But like we focus excessively on getting those three things right.
Hmm.
So, fit is extremely important to us. Our fabrics and all of our knits are custom developed by us. So they're unique to us. And then the construction, we focus, again, we're an understated line. So it's like, how do you communicate the most, the simplest, most perfect, you're essentially boiling things down to their essence,
Hmm.
right? And I think it's much harder than it seems from the outside. Like how do you communicate like the most perfect iteration of this sweatshirt or this tee, you know, and strip it down to its essence. And that's sort of how we set ourselves apart and we hang our hats is, I want the experience to be when you try it on that you instantly fall in love with it, that you like have to have it and you feel like it was made for you.
I mean, I think you're nailing it. Like, I've read your thread, I've read your customer feedback, and like, I mean, you've got guys losing their minds over so many of your things, and like, they're so excited for when are the shorts coming out? When is the next drop of the t-shirts? Can I get this t-shirt in gray? It's awesome to see. Like, you have a really loyal customer base, and they're very much on board with what you're doing.
Yeah, we're very fortunate to have a great community who, gives us feedback and, supports us. Their
Yeah.
support allows us to grow and do all these things. And, like I'm continually like humbled and grateful for the community that we've been able to assemble. And it's super exciting, like so often the customer journey, we'll see someone place their first order and then, upon delivery, they order something else. And it's always exciting. And that's sort of like, as a brand, what I want to curate, what I want this brand to be. I want you to, I'll never forget. I was shopping on La Brea, an American rag, with a good friend of mine who wasn't particularly into, he's not particularly into fashion or clothes.
Hmm.
And he tried on a T-shirt. I was like, you got to check out this T-shirt. This was before I was into everything, before the brand, before everything. I'm like, you got to check out this T-shirt. And he tried it on, and he loved it.
Hmm.
And it was like $68, which at the time was very expensive for me for a T-shirt, especially as I'm, sleeping in my friend's living room.
Yeah.
But he bought it instantly, and I was kind of blown away by it, and it kind of like this epiphany light bulb moment. I'm like, wait, people will pay for things that they like really love, and I
Hmm.
think if you can make it accessible to more people, you could attract, you could have a bigger tent,
Hmm.
and that's sort of like the core idea and tenet of like uniform.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Right now, you're producing your entire collection in Los Angeles, right?
Yes.
Is that important for you to do now and to maintain going forward?
It's very important in, you mentioned earlier when you were talking about New York
Mm,
and, sampling and how they can do small runs.
yeah.
I think producing in LA allows us to oversee everything very closely. It allows me to be at our factories every day. And, during COVID, we set up a small sewing studio
Hmm.
that we run that just sews for us. And it's essentially a lot of sample sewers that I sort of brought together. They're the best sewers that I've met. And, I can oversee the whole production. So in that regard, like it allows us to create a better product that we can oversee. Also, we have synergies between the entire team,
Yeah.
because in our studio, the pattern maker's right next door. So if
Hmm.
there's any issues that we're having in development, we can bring him in and he can talk to the rest of our team and we can kind of sort it out very quickly to, versus overseas where I've never produced. I've just, I've had some conversations, but it seems like oftentimes I've heard horror stories of like what arrives at the docks in Long Beach
Yeah.
is what you're getting.
Yeah.
So in that regards, like a high level of control is extremely important to me. And ultimately it's to make the highest quality product and make sure that we're hitting specs and catching anything, immediately. And I
Yeah.
think I think I love the idea of like made in the USA. I know that you've made a lot of your stuff in the USA as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say I take the same viewpoint. For me, it's never been so much about like making in the USA versus importing things. It's more, I mean, trying to find the best places to make things. That's crucial. So, certain things I haven't made in the USA, I made sneakers in Portugal
Hmm.
because that was the best sneaker factory that I could find that would make what we needed. I make leather jackets in Scotland because they're making the best leather jackets for the money that I've seen. But yeah, I mean, having that local accessibility, where me and my employees can go and be present at the factory, checking in a couple times a week, work with the pattern makers, buy the fabrics. You can't replace that feeling by working abroad, even if it is less expensive to do that. And I also feel that like I've been in this business for for so long now that I want to make a positive impact, outside of just making great clothes that people like. And it is really deeply satisfying to me to know that a customer has epaulette things in his wardrobe for a decade and still enjoys stuff that he got in 2010. But it's also nice to like go to these factories and realize that, okay, what we're doing is making a real difference in these people's lives. It's giving very necessary jobs to, for the most part, first generation immigrants. And, like when someone buys something from you or me, that is directly going towards employing someone to sew it in Los Angeles who really needs that work. We're not out there like saving lives on the front line, but outside of just making cool stuff, it allows us to make a really positive impact in our local community, and that's especially become like way more important for me, in the face of the pandemic and all.
Yeah, absolutely. And you make so much beautiful thing. You make so many beautiful things. Before we started talking, I had the pleasure of going through some of your samples and was blown away by the attention to detail that you have towards your things. And I love that we share that passion for, getting to know our team,
Hmm.
and like seeing them win, seeing them grow, and know that we can be a positive influence in their life. I feel the exact same way. Like, some of our sewers, it's their children's first year in college, and the sewers are first generation immigrants. So their children were, born here, and they're sort of entering into college. Their parents didn't go, and they're entering into college. So it's great to see the pride that they have in their children, and to, get to be a small part of seeing the next generation.
So, Pat, something that always stood out to me is how strong your visuals are. Who does your photography and your casting, and how do you curate your looks and your locations for shoots?
We're very fortunate to have a very talented team of photographers and models that we get to work with. That's one thing that I really love about LA is all the talent that you come across here. And we've been fortunate enough to you know assemble a team of photographers and models and layout designers who are able to bring to life, like, I'll have a rough idea, and around, like, for example, we had this vintage car shoot where
Hmm.
they, scout the garage that we were able to find, and bring the whole thing together. But essentially, it's a team effort of our core photographers, our main models, and our layout designer Evan, who sort of makes it all come together.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I did. I saw the vintage car shoot. It was awesome.
Oh, I love it. We could have shot there all day. I love it. We'll have to go back, but I mean, we did. There's so much there that like I loved, and I was so excited about the way they turned out. And we have so much
Hmm.
content from that we have yet to release.
And when you do these shoots, so you're not taking the photos, do you do all the styling and positioning?
Yeah, I do the styling, and I'm right there. So
Hmm.
whatever needs to be done, if someone needs to hold a flash and I'm there,
Right.
I'll hold the flash,
All right.
but the styling for, I do the styling for the shoots,
Hmm.
and, I'm still producing everything. So I'll assemble the team,
Mm.
get everyone talking, and, give like direction to the photographer, but I also like to let them do their own thing, because I think it's, as a creative, both on like the brand side as a designer and also as a DJ, it's one of the worst things is when you limit someone's ability to create, and like their freedom. So I like to give the photographers like loose guidelines. And
Yeah, that is it. Really, that is so important. I think whenever you work with a creative person, you gotta give them a briefing that kind of tells them what you want in a general sense, but give them the freedom to interpret things according to their skills.
yeah,
That's
absolutely.
definitely how you get the best work.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great. Let's talk. So, style question here. What are three crucial items that can improve the personal style of any man?
It's
I realize this is like this is a very cliched question, but
this is
I'm
a
real.
very,
I'm honestly super curious about your perspective on that.
this
Three
is a, this is
items,
a very tough question that I'm not sure I'm going to answer, the way that you're delivering it.
right?
But I think the most important thing, not to cop out of the question,
It's okay if you don't have three exact items. This is also okay.
but I think the most important thing is developing a strong wardrobe foundation.
Hmm.
Um, and on that, everything builds. I think the core of the modern man's wardrobe is the t-shirt.
Hmm.
And I think getting tees, so much of like quote unquote dressing well
Yeah.
is finding a style that you're comfortable in that suits you, and I think through that you begin to shine.
Hmm.
So to me, it's finding the silhouettes that work for you and amassing like really solid basics. So whether it's like denim jeans, a t-shirt, flannel, in your case, chinos,
Hmm.
maybe a blazer. It's finding things that work for you that you're able to effortlessly pull from that you feel comfortable with.
Hmm.
Because I think oftentimes when men get into like, when they wade into like, I'm going to dress better, they sort of co-opt a look that's not genuine to who they are.
Yeah.
I used to, when I first moved to LA, I DJ'd at the Grove every weekend.
Hmm.
And I always found it so fascinating. And this was sort of like when the Yeezy, I believe it's like
The
the
boost. Yeah. The
Boost
Yeezy boost.
350 or
Uh huh.
whatever. When you couldn't
Yep.
get them, the one with the strap. I don't know
Yeah.
the
The sneakers. Yeah.
750. I don't know the name of it, but it was right around that Kanye era when the Boost was like just coming, or I'm sorry, the Yeezy Boost was coming into like prevalence, and you'd see so many people, and like I would always in my head sort of like marvel at what I was seeing because it seemed like so many people were coming in dressed in a manner that was almost like cosplay. Like it was almost like the same as if it were Halloween. They were dressed like a fireman, you know, where they were dressed in something where it looked like they were playing a character. So,
Hmm.
and I mentioned that just to say this. I think it's, trends come and go.
Yeah.
And I think like you assimilate what works for you through those trends. But I think the most important thing is like a solid core wardrobe.
Hmm.
And then beyond that, just to have, I'll say that as one, I think a pair of sunglasses that complement your face goes a long way.
That's definitely important. Yeah. You're
A-
right.
and then accessories as far as like necklaces or jewelries that you love, and I think that really adds a lot to your personal style.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I would totally agree. I think that's a great perspective on it. Like how important it is to be comfortable in what you're wearing, because it's like you could read 5 million posts online, advising guys who are interested in style, about what they should wear, and in ways like I remember the early days of Styleforum. We were both there. Like it was almost like a cliche that you would go on there and you would be advised to buy APC selvage jeans, the
Yeah.
APC new standard, and pair that with your Clark's desert boots and maybe a barber jacket. I don't know what preceded the barber jacket as the advised thing. Eventually, it morphed into the barber jacket with selvage jeans and the Alden indie boot and an Oxford shirt. And these things are great. These are good. These are good items, and they're still relevant today. But like you have to be comfortable in it. You do see. I always get reminded of Crazy Stupid Love, the 2011 movie with like Steve Carell in it, and Ryan Gosling decides to style him. So they go to a mall, and Ryan Gosling picks out all this stuff. At one point, Steve Carell's wearing a pair of New Balances, and Ryan Gosling is like, "What are you wearing on your feet? Are you Steve Jobs, the billionaire founder of Apple? Are you in a fraternity?" And he takes his New Balance and throws it off a rack, which is funny given how much New Balance has
Yeah.
ascended and is now kind of like the most desirable shoe brand. But anyway, they dress Steve Carell up, and he's got like He has like 5 layers on. He has like a half zip sweater and a sport coat, and he's trying to meet women at a bar. And then finally, just confesses he's like, I feel like I'm on a ski trip. Everything beneath this clothing is just sweat. It's 5 layers of sweat. And yeah, like on the surface, okay, yeah, you would see a magazine shoot where somebody would be styled, or maybe you would see like a mannequin in like a polo Ralph Lauren shop and shop. But
Yeah.
yeah, if you're not comfortable wearing all that stuff, then it doesn't matter. You won't feel good and you won't look good.
Yeah, and I think I imagine, I can't speak for you, but I mean, I've definitely been there. You mentioned the Band of Outsiders days, and, I was a big fan of that brand,
Hmm.
but it was never authentic to me.
Yeah,
I love the menswear sort of slim fit thing, and I had a ton of Band of Outsiders, and like was a big fan of Scott Sternberg. I believe that's his
yeah,
name.
yeah. Scott Summer. Yeah, I mean, he was a visionary. Band of Outsiders, like visually, it was amazing.
Yeah,
you know like in terms of the actual clothing, it was really difficult for a lot of people to fit into that stuff because it was so shrunken.
yeah.
But
And when you
he
wore it, like,
he told a great story.
oh, wonderful. And when you wore it, it did feel like, that was one of my early sort of like introduction to like, this is what fit could be.
Right.
And even though it's not universal, I sort of marveled at what they were able to do
Hmm.
by sort of selling like this whole aesthetic. And I was a huge fan of it. I bought a ton of it, but it was never, that preppy aesthetic was never really authentic to me. So like I would wear it, but it was like somewhat uncomfortable
Right.
to me. And I see pictures where I'm like DJing in a Band of Outsiders shirt
Do you,
now from that era, and
yeah,
it's just so funny.
do you have like a bow tie on?
I don't have a bow tie now. I never went full Kool-Aid.
Okay. All right. um, your business is all e-commerce at the moment. Are you thinking of a physical storefront in the future?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, cool.
We've talked. You had some storefronts.
Hmm.
Um, I would absolutely love to. I have a vision, a dream of our first store
Hmm.
and sort of like what it will be. So it's definitely in the goals,
Oh, wow.
hopefully relatively soon. But I'd love to cultivate a space that our community can come together and enjoy.
Hmm.
I think so often in luxury fashion, it's very like stuffy and unwelcoming.
Yeah.
Like you kind of come in and it's almost like you're stepping into like a museum, and someone greets you and it's can oftentimes be uncomfortable, or that's the experience that I've had.
Same.
And I'd like to cultivate a shared space where our customers can stop by,
Hmm.
and it's a community. It's sort of like a community center where they can meet other people who are, fans of the brand and part of our community, and sort of network. Like that's how I imagine it being. So it won't just be like a retail store, but some other things and hosting events, and
Yeah.
it's definitely something that we plan to do.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I had 3 stores in my time: Brooklyn, Manhattan, both in New York, and then Santa Monica. And, I wouldn't say this was intentional, but, my stores were casual places for people to gather. And they weren't too serious. I think largely because I'm honestly not capable of having a serious store. No one is handing me any awards for for like a physical space design.
Yeah.
It was always kind of like a bit slapped together. We always ran an e-commerce business and would be doing the same thing at the same time. So anytime you entered an Epaulet store, you'd always hear like a tape gun going in the background as boxes got taped together and, things got unloaded. But I think, yeah, to your point, I mean, this made it a more accessible space. Like no one felt like they were walking into like a really serious art museum where they weren't allowed to touch things. And even if maybe some people were turned off by that, who wanted a more high end experience to go along with the level of product we were selling, I think far more people, were enamored of just the accessibility. It was just a fun place to go. And when you and the other employees are also busy doing other stuff, they feel the freedom to browse and look around at stuff without feeling like you're watching them like a hawk. And it was really interesting how that worked out. I imagine one of your stores would give off similar energy.
Yeah, and I also think it would be a great move for the brand to bring more customers in to introduce them, because what we do isn't always translated as well in photographs because it
Hmm.
is so understated.
Yeah.
It's more experiential. It's putting it on, it's feeling how it fits, it's feeling the weight of the fabric. It's, all these different things I think would lend themselves wonderfully to a physical store.
Oh, cool. Okay, so now I got two questions I've been asking. They're like two opposites. So first, tell us about a project that you did that was a really unexpected success. Something that you didn't anticipate, but it really worked out.
Without a doubt, it's our mesh shorts, the
Yeah.
sunset court
Uh
shorts.
huh.
It was a project we spearheaded at the request of our community in Styleforum. They we were making t-shirts and sweatshirts and hoodies at the time, and they wanted us to make mesh shorts. And it was something I was interested in as well. But essentially what happened is I sort of went down the rabbit hole in the design process, and I
Hmm.
imagine you've been there too,
Hmm.
where you get so close to a product. I believe we ran like 9 samples with everything,
Wow.
with just various fabrics. We were doing a lot of fabric tests and, switching out these things. And it was, like I'm having trouble thinking of when we dropped it, but it was early. It was an early bottom for us, right? I can't remember if we dropped sweatpants before that or after it. But so I was still, getting familiar with the design process. And, halfway through the design, we thought we were done. And we came to the community and style forum with it and said, we're ready to drop these mesh shorts. And the first question was, well, how long is the inseam? And initially
Okay.
it was 7 inches,
Whoa. Yeah.
which they let us know was too long. So, we went back to the drawing board on it, shortened it an inch to 6 inches. But after we'd done that, I was still like so close to the product that I wasn't able to see the big picture. And we would try on fit models and they would go crazy.
Wow.
They loved it. My girlfriend is telling me, this is one of the best things you've made.
Hmm.
And everyone around me is telling me they're a hit.
Wow.
But I'm so close to it. It's like have you done this with a project where you're so close to it that you're like, you get so close that you don't know how, you can't perceive what it is.
Totally. Yeah. I know exactly what you're saying.
And we dropped it. Up until drop, I was still completely unsure of it, and it sold out instantaneously. And that was one. That's always the first hurdle. The second
Hmm.
hurdle is when your customer gets it in hand,
Right.
and when they got it in hand, they loved it. And then we restocked it as quickly as we could, and it sold out instantly again. And to this day, it's our best selling. It's our best selling shorts by far. It's one of our best selling products.
Wow.
But I didn't see it coming.
Oh, it's always great when that stuff happens.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay, so now tell me about the reverse situation. When was something that like you really planned it and mapped it out and you were so sure it was going to work and then it bombed?
Yeah, it was I don't know that it was like our biggest commercial failure, but it's definitely a pair of sweatpants we have called the Concord sweatpants. It has
Mhm.
like a bungee on the bottom and a toggle.
Okay.
And I was so sure this was going to be our breakout hit that was going to make us a household name. The fit on them, I still think to this day, the fit on them is impeccable. I put on a pair, I'm like, these are so good. But I think a couple of things happened. We didn't do enough. We didn't do a good enough job as a brand of explaining them and
Hmm.
storytelling and featuring them and explaining why they were so great. And they just were kind of lukewarm. We have customers who love them, and to this day, I still think they're great. But it was probably the biggest letdown as a designer that like I've had, where I was so sure that like this is it. We're going to the moon with this one, and it's just, I won't say bricks, but I don't know. Is there anything in your career? You've had such a long career, and I've enjoyed so much getting to like talk to you about some of your experience. Is there anything in your career that stands out like that?
Oh my God. I mean, I have countless experiences like that. I know when I did the podcast with Yuki Matsuda, I think I talked about us trying to make like kind of reproduction Doc Martens at the original Doc Marten factory in the UK, which that was like a total sales disaster. But something which I do remember, which made a lot of sense and was really completely within our wheelhouse. We had a lot of customers who were interested in a capri collar shirt. And capri collar, it's like a dress shirt that has a one-piece collar. So when you have it unbuttoned at the neck, it gives this really like elegant line that a regular like two-piece shirt couldn't do. And it's hard to find. If there's a place in the United States that makes this shirt construction, I don't know what it is. But our shirts made by Individualized, they don't offer it. So I had been doing a lot of production in Portugal. I had a lot of customers coming out and asking me to do this. And there was also on Styleforum, there was a general kind of a passion for this kind of product and people looking for it. You could buy it, but it was expensive. And there were only a few sources for it. And eventually I found this factory that we ended up making quite a few shirts with. One of the oldest shirt factories in Portugal. Absolutely beautiful facility, making wonderful products. To this day, like for our off the rack shirts, they made some of the best off the rack product we've ever had from anyone. Sourced this beautiful Oxford cloth for it, these great buttons. We had a really competitive price point for it, which was like cheaper than we sold most off the rack shirts for. I had all the basics covered. I had a model, a good photo shoot, and much like your sweatpants, they came in, and I was like, this is gonna be the banger of all time, and like the hardest thing of my life this year is gonna be keeping the capri one piece collar shirt in stock. And boy, it was not like that at all. We sold a few of them, and then it just set. And I was even like, I was doing a lot of photo shoots with other items, with sport coats and other things. And I always used the capri shirts, as an underpinning and constantly showing them off. And just for whatever reason, like maybe a couple of dedicated customers who have been calling for this product, they bought it, and then it just didn't resonate with the rest of my customers. And like you said, I do have guys who liked it a lot. I mean, I'd say maybe once every month or so, I get an email of somebody being like, "When are you going to bring the capri collar shirts back?" And I'm always like, "Absolutely never," because I had to clear all of them for like 75% off
Yeah.
before they finally sold. And I had like big minimums. I had to import it from Portugal with that whole process. And yeah, I mean, that is a reality in our industry. Maybe it's a reality in a lot of our industries, but sometimes the best laid plans and everything seems to be, but you can never really anticipate exactly what the customers want. I guess if I could anticipate what the customers want all the time and, be running a business like 800 times the size, because why wouldn't I be? Every single thing that I make is a massive hit.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's a
No,
very, very humbling experience.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I've had lots of these humbling experiences. Let's be clear. I was the type to go to like trade shows and get very excited by products that I see and be like, oh my god, this is amazing. Let's do our own version of this. And then it comes out and it turns out I'm literally the only person who wants this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're the,
The key is don't overcommit. You never know when this is going to happen. So like as long as you keep everything pretty conservative in the beginning with the quantities and the money you're investing, it can only hurt so bad.
yeah.
So, my last question, something that I do like to ask: any advice for young entrepreneurs out there, or not young entrepreneurs, potential entrepreneurs who want to follow in your footsteps?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think whenever you're pursuing anything that you want to be great at, I think the most important piece of advice I would give is to be relentless and never stop learning. In the beginning, especially, you're going to experience a lot of no's and
Mhm.
failures and setbacks, and it's at a time where it's hardest to take them. But you just have to persevere and keep going. I would recommend always staying humble and finding people who you can learn from and who can mentor you. And before approaching them, ask yourself, how can I bring value to this person's life so that they'll in turn bring value to mine? I think reciprocity goes a very long way. But I
Mhm.
think the main thing, and I'm still learning every day, is to be persistent, humble, and never stop learning.
Great advice. Yeah.
What would yours be?
I mean, I would say much the same thing, and I am fond of saying that if you're going to be in retail, you should probably consider taking up weightlifting as your primary way of of keeping fit, because it is surprising how much heavy stuff we are constantly lifting all the time.
Yeah.
Like since day one, like yeah, when I would the early days of F, like getting like multiple boxes of shoes, and each box weighs like 52 pounds. You got to drag it into a store. Yeah, like rethink, jogging as your primary form of fitness, because it's a surprisingly physical job. Especially when you're on our side. A lot of people see the fashion industry and they think, oh wow, it's super glamorous. You must go to like a lot of parties and meet a lot of celebrities, and we're always just like, not really, but we do go to a lot of factories and see a
Yeah.
lot of things getting sewn.
I think when
Yeah.
you're on the other side of it, to what Aaron Helgerson told me early on, it's nothing like you think it's going to be. I think I meet so many young designers, and one of the first things I tell them is when they talk to me about my experience and advice that I have for them is you're going to be spending so little of your time actually designing
Hmm.
if you're an entrepreneur business owner.
Yeah.
And there's so many other things that you're not going to realize that you're going to have to become proficient in and spend so much of your time, like sourcing and ordering and QCing and all these other things. And I mean, the whole bit, we talked about it earlier, but communicating in a visual language, your ideas. I mean, these are things that like I never really considered when I was like, oh, we're going to make the best t-shirt in the world.
Hmm.
I didn't think I would be lugging up, to your point, boxes and boxes and boxes of t-shirts to my
Yeah.
apartment, and just one, like I never thought logistics would be an issue,
Hmm.
or all these things that we deal with.
Yeah, it is so much more satisfying though. I did have a little bit of the other perspective of, like I was a buyer at Saks Fifth Avenue, and that was, it was a pretty like glamorous job. Like I bought, really like high end brands, which would always have beautiful showrooms and would have parties with celebrities and like way too much free booze. And like, Hugo Boss had an office kind of on the west side of Manhattan, close to the Chelsea Piers. And like when it would be market week, they would just have open bar there like every night for like 2 weeks. And you could just go there at 8 p.m. and they'd have a DJ, and you could just be drinking and having, all sorts of small bites, and famous people would show up. And this was a glamorous situation for sure.
Yeah.
Andre 3000 came dressed as Santa Claus once.
Big fan, big
Lots of
fan.
lots of funny memories from then. But yeah, I mean, our side is far more satisfying. As much fun as it is to be like in the really glamorous side of fashion. Maybe you're selling a lot of stuff. Far more satisfying for me to do, like, this past weekend I had a customer who came, and did an appointment. He was looking to make some custom shirts, and he just told me how meaningful all the clothes that he buys from me is to his life. He got married in a suit that I made for him, and he's been a customer for, going on like 11 years. So he has this whole archive of clothing,
Yeah.
and I'm sure you have plenty of people like this as well. And like in a way, like clothing is something which is a commodity that you see everywhere else, but it's also the thing that you put onto your body. It's how you represent yourself. And when customers choose to purchase something from us, this small brand where they can get to know the owner, they can know the process for it. It's a much deeper connection than them just getting a bunch of stuff from Uniqlo.
Yeah.
They feel a connection with us. This clothing, it's more than just a garment for them. It's a part of their own identity, and to be able to be a part of that, is pretty amazing for sure, and
Oh,
be the creator of that.
absolutely. It's amazing because it is a special day. You're talking about someone's wedding day,
Yeah,
and these are photos that they'll always look back on. And in a way, you're there,
totally.
or a piece of you is there.
Yep.
And, I always feel so floored and humbled. A lot of our guys are having children, and they'll send a picture the first time they're holding their child. They're in like one of our tees.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, or they're in the Sunset Court shorts, and it's just like it floors me every time. And that they would think enough of us and me to share, to send a photo
Hmm.
and say, "Hey, I just want to let you know, like, I got one the other day. Like, I really do wear you guys all the time. Here's me in, the French Terry artist tee, welcoming our second daughter to the family." It's amazing.
It's a big deal, and it's like, and you need to be a small, like, a small brand like us, with a designer like us, that you can do. I mean, I'm like, you might own a pair of Nikes that you wore in, a momentous part of your life, what are you going to do? Take a picture of your Nikes and send it to Nike.com and be like, yo, look at this. I wore these Nikes when I got an award. And then you're going to have some random person who's employed by Nike say, congratulations. That's great. By the way, here's 15% off your next purchase. I mean, I wonder if that works. I do. I have one Nikes. I might try that to get a discount code. I'm making this up, but I do like to say, you have to be like our scale, and I think it's a wonderful experience both for us and for our customers with the way that we can, be in touch with each other and affect each other's lives.
Absolutely.
Cool. Okay, so going forward, I'm going to run through. We have some questions which were submitted by by your fans on both Styleforum. So I'm going to ask these. First up, from Styleforum, we have a user named Wally_SF, and he asked, "We are all pretty pumped on the denim and outerwear. Was being a brand with variety always your model, or was the idea originally to just put out quality basics?"
Yeah, we kind of touched on this a bit earlier,
Yeah.
but originally it sounds so, it makes me laugh now, but I remember a part earlier in the brand. To answer the question very directly, originally we were going to be a basics brand.
Mm-hmm.
And in the very beginning, I remember thinking that the whole scope of Uniform LA, the brand, would be we would have, two t-shirts, a crew neck, a U-neck. We would make a crew neck sweatshirt, a pair of sweatpants, and a hoodie.
Mm-hmm.
And, at that point, I was like, and that's sort of all the ideas I have.
Right.
I'm tapped out of ideas. What else could we possibly make? So at first, we were definitely just going to be a basics brand, but through like forming synergies with the community and them telling us what they'd like to see, and diving more into like my passion and curiosities with everything. Denim was like the first thing that got me into this. To your point, the APC new standard,
right. Yeah,
is a hell of a gateway drug.
Yeah.
You want those fades so bad.
Mm-hmm.
But it's evolved so much, and now we're fortunate enough to be in a financial situation where we can explore all these different avenues in a sustainable way that's fueled by the core basics. So to answer his question, it wasn't in the plans initially, but it's blossomed into that now. It's sort of like pivoting as you get to know your customer and their needs and making sure that you're addressing it while also being passionate about what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Okay, and now I have a couple questions from a user. I'm not going to try to pronounce his name, but it's spelled NSUBRMNN. I believe his name is Neil. And he's got a few things we're going to ask. How do you decide what you're making? Initially, it was a brand that just made tees and terry, and it's evolved into much more. Do you try to make the best iteration of things you already own or things that are missing from your closet? I mean, I guess we have kind of touched on this.
Yeah, we have kind of touched on it. Going into the second part of the question, it's things where I feel like there's an opportunity for us to add something to it. Like if there's a product or a product category that I think someone else executes at a level we won't be able to, and there's nothing we can add to that, we're not going to do it. There's no point. There's so much. You mentioned the commoditization of clothing. There's not a lack of clothing in the world.
That's true.
And in Uniform, one of the main things that inspired me to get into it was not that the world needs more clothes, but I felt that the world needs better clothing.
Yeah.
Right. What we've witnessed in the past few years is sort of a race to the bottom. Everyone's pursuing the fast fashion model, and it has terrible implications both for our mental well-being, but also the planet. And I think that's the polar opposite of what most men want. I think men want nicer things. They just haven't been exposed to them. And to answer his question, we're sort of guided by like curiosity and customer development. Oftentimes, like, I'll have an idea like I'm excited about, one of the things I was really excited about was the trucker hat. We have a trucker hat coming out in the I-10 trucker.
Right.
And it was just something that like I was always personally looking for that I wasn't able to find. I have like unruly, like curly hair sometimes. And it'd be nice when you're running late to a meeting just to throw on a hat, look presentable. But I could never really find anything that like I like the silhouette and fit of and like was made really well. So sometimes that guides us. Sometimes it's the it's our community, like I said earlier, asking us to make something. And other times it's it's much more like serendipitous than that. I'll see something
Mhm.
out and I'm like, oh, this is a cool idea, but they should have done it like this. Or I'll try something on and be like, oh, I love this idea, but I would have done it like this.
Right.
And that sort of spurs our
Mhm.
the creative process.
Very cool. Um, I have one really interesting question. What has been the impact of the pandemic on your new product development? And he says, I imagine going to trade shows, sourcing fabrics, etc., has been difficult.
Yeah.
Probably an understatement. Yeah, it turns out the pandemic was a little bit difficult. Yeah, it was crazy. But how did you handle it?
Yeah, the pandemic, after the existential dread kind of wore off, after we were no longer able to, bleach our groceries with Clorox wipes
Right.
because of the soaring costs.
Yeah.
After things died down, the pandemic was a very transformational time for the brand.
Mm,
Um, because it got really quiet. Up to that point, I was still DJing
mm,
on the weekends and I would, work on the brand full time as well. So it was the first time that I wasn't able to do that
right.
and could sit down in a very quiet place. Initially all the factories in LA were closed
Yeah.
and then they were opened up to make masks. They were deemed essential workers. And in that time, I credit the pandemic with being the transformational change agent for the brand from us going to like just a core basics brand
Hmm.
to like a full blown line.
Yeah.
Prior to the pandemic, we started exploring denim.
Mm,
And the factory that we chose to do our denim was the factory Fear of God was using.
hmm.
And I'll never forget, I went into their factory the first day and I thought it was run by absolutely insane people because you walk in and it says no photos, no videos, no social media. And I was like, okay.
Wow.
And then you open the door and along the wall is the same sign over and over and over again. And I was like, okay. And then when you enter, you see the same sign plastered everywhere. And I'm like,
Hmm.
okay,
Right.
this is very odd. Like, there must be a story here. And, once you get in the corridor, they had all these huge posters from Fear of God, and it
Hmm.
was their factory. And, we partnered with them to do the denim.
Hmm.
And in that process, I got one of my most impactful mentors who helped them come up from a smaller label to, what they were able to achieve.
Yeah.
And what I would do is I would sort of donate my time to them. I had, all this free time. I would help them with masks, packing masks,
Hmm.
whatever they needed.
Yeah.
I would help in exchange for getting some of his time to teach me things.
Hmm.
And sort of being in that factory with us and Fear of God, I was able to see very closely how they were operating and like what they were doing and all these things. And it sort of like shifted my perception on what was possible and like what we could do. I think it's like I almost equate it to like, it's one thing to sit in the stands and see Kobe Bryant
Hmm.
play.
Yeah.
Is sort of like how I was at the time equating those guys to be. It's another thing when you're in practice every day with him and to see like what their rituals, what his rituals are and what his habits are, and sort of break those down and understand like how you could achieve those same things too.
Right.
So, you know, picking up a mentor in that was sort of what after that it elevated everything we were doing. Like it changed the way I was viewing fabrics, fabric development, and everything. So the pandemic was like, you know, I feel almost guilty saying this because I know a lot of people, we've talked about it off mic. I know a lot of people have suffered a lot from the pandemic and have had terrible losses, but for us as a brand, it was transformational and took us to the next level.
Hmm. Yeah, it's good. I mean, I've definitely heard both sides of it. It was really difficult for us because like so much of our business is this kind of custom stuff, which is mostly made on the East Coast. We were doing suits at Southwick and Brooks Brothers, who just completely went bankrupt during that time. Custom shirts with individualized who pretty much couldn't make shirts for I don't know maybe like 4 or 5 months. They only made masks. And then also if you're trading in the kind of like business space or business casual space, that obviously got decimated because everybody's working from home. Um, but I think a lot of it was also just based on like your mental attitude as an entrepreneur. Like, I mean, okay, if you're an entrepreneur and you own a series of bars, like
Yeah.
no positive mental attitude was going to change that if all your bars were shut down. But it sounds like you really grabbed that as an opportunity to develop, and that's great.
Yeah, and I was fortunate enough to have I had a roommate at that time, and we developed a lot of positive habits. We would work out together in body weight workouts. You and I
Hmm.
have talked about like fitness and how
Yeah,
important fitness is to both of our lives. And
yeah,
for me, and I imagine for you as well, it's sort of like what allows me to be, for lack of a better word, sane.
yeah,
And
yeah.
sort of like
I'd agree. I mean, it might be debatable how sane I am, but to what degree I am, it's definitely fitness is a major anchor for that.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
doing like those sort of like getting back to the basics on everything, like body weight workouts and like jumping rope. During that time was in the best shape of my life, and spending a lot of time reading. So, I feel very fortunate
yeah.
that I was able to do that.
That's great. And then the last question from this user asks, "What do you define as success? Where do you see the brand going? Are you going to be a niche group, a household name, sold at wholesale?"
Um, I'd love to be a household name.
Hmm.
Like I mentioned earlier, the goal, with the brand is to introduce people to a level of clothing that they haven't experienced before. Like I feel like so many people are essentially the equivalent of a fast food diet
Hmm.
with their clothing,
Yeah,
and we want to introduce them to a gourmet dinner.
that's a good way of saying it.
If
Yeah.
you've eaten McDonald's your whole life, you don't understand what, a perfectly cooked steak is like. And that's what I ultimately want to do with Uniform. And I think the vehicle to do that would be being as big as possible to have as much exposure and finances to be able to do that and introduce ourselves and stick to the same core principles. So to answer the question, like I would love to be a household name. I would love to be one of the best or one of the new like huge brands, but to stick to like our morals and principles that got us there.
Hmm. That's great. Okay, and now I've got two questions. This is from a username GGSS09. Um, he's asking, well, I guess we touched on some of this. What is the end game for Uniform LA? Collaborating with a dream brand, releasing a certain hard to make product?
Yeah, we have sort of touched on that.
Yeah,
But to add to what we've already mentioned, um, would love to have a retail storefront
yeah.
where ultimately, like I want the first one to be in Los Angeles and then the second one to be in New York, as that's where our core group of customers are. But I would also like love to have the ability and freedom to collab and have fun with like other brands.
What
I
is
don't know. I don't know.
what are some dream partners? Like who do you really want to collaborate with? In a
Yeah,
perfect world, if you could just call like, I don't know, two or three of them out.
I think they'd be unexpected. I think for me, it's a lot less fashion centric and more like brand centric.
Hmm.
One idea that like we're starting to play with and explore is something called the Artist Series,
Hmm.
where we tap artists to sort of use our what we've created as a blank canvas to create.
Hmm.
So, like I mentioned, we have the I-10 trucker hat. How do you see this? Like, if you're an artist, like, what sort of patch would you see on this? Like, what sort of graphics would you put on the hoodie? Or, like, what do the shorts look like? So, for me, the dream collaborations are like a little bit more unexpected. I think one that jumps to mind is Sinclair gas station.
Oh yeah.
And I know
Wait,
that's
with like the dinosaur logo?
yeah, with like
Yeah.
the Brontosaurus. And like I love the idea of playing with like the iconography that they've created.
Yeah.
And like brands like that, I know like Bass Pro Shop has a trucker hat.
This is
Like,
cool. I definitely did not expect you to answer with Sinclair gas stations, but it's great.
but I love sort of like that Americana feel to it. And I would love to kind of bring it full circle, these brands that are sort of like American staples or powerhouses as brands. I would love to collaborate with them and sort of work with them to give a unique streetwear spin on what they're doing. So I would love to have the freedom to do that. That's something we plan to start exploring more.
Cool. That's great. Anyone else?
Uh, I would love to do it. Like, I would love to. Footwear is very interesting to me.
Hmm.
There's a number of footwear ideas I have. Nothing that like at this point I'm going to share. Is there
Okay.
anyone for you that jumps out that maybe would be unexpected for the listeners to hear?
Wow. Oh man. Yeah. So I didn't even think about this. Hmm. I would love. Well, I mean, I love making tailored clothing. Um, we've been doing some really, really beautiful product with Hickey Freeman,
Okay.
and I think it would be so cool to try to do maybe something a little different and a little more directional. With a different like a European company, like it would be awesome to work with Xenia or even work with like Canali, kind of one of
Yeah.
those older school, you know, menswear luxury brands that really does like absolutely gorgeous work. Um, we do a lot. Well, we're releasing a collaborative jacket with Red Bar Group, which is the premier watch collecting and watch enthusiast club
Okay.
in the world. They've got chapters in all these different cities, and we're making a beautiful special edition of our Doyle jacket and a really special denim with these cool prints on the inside. And watches have always been like a really huge passion for me and a big source of interest. So I would love to work with a watch company at some point, some kind of watch brand. I don't know in what capacity. Um, and I will say, I go to the Gold's Gym in Venice, California, and
Yeah.
I'm really a big fan of their merchandise.
Yeah.
They've got this really cool like pro shop in the back, and they get like a surprising amount of new clothing drops. And there's been like some interesting collaborations. They did a co-branded line with a brand called Yeah I Work Out. Maybe you know them.
I'm not familiar enough.
It's pretty cool. I think they're based out of Los Angeles. I don't know them personally, but their whole line is brilliant. The whole thing is like very cool and like a little bit of a throwback. And I really liked what they did with Golds. Like so much of like a lot of epaulettes, just like I feel like a lot of uniform. Like we do tend to like favor like more like tailored shapes, and our looks are modern, but they're not super trendy. And it would be super rad to bring like that kind of aesthetic to some kind of like co-branded workout or Gold's Gym apparel. You
Yeah.
know,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And I think the watch thing too for you, I saw the way you kind of lit up when you were talking about like a watch collaboration and like how excited that made you.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, it's so much. Well, I love the Red Bar group, and it's such a like it's a wonderful community of people, and it's this way for you to like, if you're into that world, you can go to these great events where you're meeting watchmakers and people from watch brands, and just like getting caught up in this kind of like nerdy otaku side
yeah.
of the industry, rather than the just kind of like materialistic and show off and flexing side of it. Which I think that's also kind of how our brands work. People who are purchasing stuff from you or me, or not necessarily looking for some big screaming brand. I mean, you don't have a logo on any of your stuff, right?
No, we have a plain black label
Okay.
on the bag.
Yeah, I don't do any logo treatments on anything really. I mean, like our stuff would only be recognizable to somebody in the know who
Yeah.
recognizes the design. Um, I don't know where I was going with that, but it's like, yeah, it's also like this kind of like easily accessible, supportive community that's not snobby, that doesn't have an attitude problem, and yeah, it would be very cool for to work with like some direct watch manufacturers and watch brands that I really like to, I don't know, make garments around that, make a little clothing collection around that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I love that.
yeah, that's great. Um, okay, last question. This is also from GGSS09. He says, I think many of us have read Shoe Dog, and we have seen the type of liquidity issues that successful brands can run into when they are bootstrapped and not funded by outside investors. Has this been a challenge for Uniform LA when it comes to scaling up production or investing in new products or categories?
Yeah, absolutely. And he mentions the book Shoe Dog,
Hmm.
which is a wonderful book, one of my
That's
favorites.
is it the Phil Knight
Yeah,
Nike book? Yeah.
it's I believe it's like basically the Phil Knight autobiography where he talks about how he came to found Nike, and I'm spacing where it ends, but it's a absolutely phenomenal read. If you haven't read it, I'd highly suggest you read it. But we've absolutely experienced a number of a number of difficulties, I
Mm-hmm.
guess, because of the way that we're set up. But I think in saying that, I also want to point out, more importantly, why we're set up like that. It's intentional that we're bootstrapped and that I'm 100% shareholder
Mm-hmm.
of the brand. And it's because it allows me the creative freedom to do whatever I want, um, without answering to anyone. So if there's a fabric we want to make, if there's, a silhouette or style, regardless of the cost, if the brand has to take less margin on it, then we do it because that's what I feel like is best for the brand.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to do. That being said, there are a number of challenges with that business model.
Yeah.
Essentially, is that there's, all sorts of cash flow issues where we're scaling up all of our production, especially on our core products like tees and sweatshirts and the sunset cord shorts and, our nylon shorts, the vintage field shorts. And we're able to do it because of our business model relies heavily on a drop model. So we're
Mm-hmm.
never holding much product,
Mm-hmm.
and we're largely able to stay, largely liquid. Like we get a product in and we sell it off more aggressively, but it's definitely caused some things that we have to be creative with. It's caused some issues that if you're funded you don't probably have. But I think the other side of that coin is, I think if you have money, your default is to throw money at problems
Yeah.
instead of like get creative with them and solve them. And like I'm a firm believer that creativity is a byproduct of necessity. We have to be creative with a lot of our solutions because we can't throw money at every problem. Um, and also, I think, eventually maybe we will take money. We get offered that all the time, as, people want to have conversations about it. But I haven't done it because so often the conversation leads with, you could do this way cheaper here.
Yep.
And it's immediately apparent to me that they don't understand what we're doing or why we're doing. We're not trying to make the cheapest sweatshirt possible. We're not trying to make the cheapest mesh shorts possible. We're trying to make the best.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the design brief on everything we're doing, is how do we make the best version of this and bring the most value to our customers? And, there's nothing wrong with what they want, but what they want is to make money, and I just don't want to give up creative control so that someone else can make money, and what we're doing, sort of like loses its purpose for me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I think like the bootstrapping thing, because I've been bootstrapped the whole time. Like I've taken loans. Like I've had some bank loans. I have had some loans from Shopify. PayPal will give you a loan. So I've done like direct borrowing at fairly high interest rates. But I don't have any investors. I think
yeah,
I've known a lot of people who take outside money and they take investment from day one. And then you're under immense pressure, and you also kind of miss out on a lot of those lessons that a feeling of scarcity will teach you.
yeah,
I mean, you need, it helps if you don't have a lot of outside expenses, and you can run things lean and mean in the early years when you're still learning and growing. But
yeah.
I think, whether either of us takes some major investment money in the future, the fact that you do stay bootstrapped and manage to be profitable and sustainable with that's a huge thing for future success.
Yeah, and I think, I'm sure you have. I know I've heard like horror stories, where the original founder essentially is, at the end of taking so many rounds,
Hmm.
holds such a small percentage in the
Yeah.
company that they're now a minority voice in the company they founded.
Yep.
And I think we've also seen things that maybe aren't that extreme, where a clothing company takes money, and suddenly, because of pressure from the investors, their prices go insane because it's more about the margins than whatever the original mission was, or bringing value to the customer base.
Yeah, I mean I think the biggest horror story is just not like you're just constantly pissing away money on all these things that you don't need to spend because you have it. So you end up spending a lot
Yeah,
of money on stuff that's not necessary, or things which are counterproductive. And as it goes in our industry, usually it's not like you're creating some radical new scientific achievement that the world has never seen. Pretty much, if you're a brand like at our scale and someone wants to come by and invest a lot of money, their huge idea is going to be, I want to take what you're making and make it cheaper.
Yeah.
And, in the case of things like you're doing, tees, sweats, basic shorts, or for me, I do a lot of like, simple jackets, chinos. Like if we just started making this stuff low cost, and like you lower the retail, but you radically lower the cost and the materials, then you've also kind of lost the meaning.
Yeah,
Like now
exactly.
you're just making, cheap and kind of lousy basics, like the countless amount of cheap and lousy basic companies out there.
Yeah, it's impossible to stand out when you look and feel like everyone else. You know, the way that your brand and my brand are able to stand out is because of the quality and the
Mhm.
craftsmanship behind what we do and like the attention to detail. And if you strip all those away, like I would question, well, why does this exist? What is the need for this?
Yeah, totally. All right. Well, I mean, unless you have anything you want to add, my God, we've covered like a million bases. This has been amazing.
Yeah, I've absolutely loved sitting down with you. You know,
Yeah,
it's been a pleasure, today and the previous times we've talked. So I just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to Style Forum, to FOG, to our community. Thank you for everyone who took the time to listen.
perfect. Thank you so much. And Pat, do you want just say your website address, just in case anyone's looking for it?
Yeah, absolutely. If you'd like, you can check us out at uniformla.com. We're also Uniform LA on all our socials.
Hmm.
And our Style Forum thread is you're able to find that under the same link. We'll put a link to the thread in the journal
Yeah.
post.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Pat. It was great talking.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.